President Bush on videotape from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Where the president is at this moment, we do not know. The president said freedom itself was attacked by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. With us here at our CBS News World headquarters in New York is one of the world's outstanding experts on terrorism, Jerry Hauer, who's the former commissioner of the mayor's office here in New York City of emergency management. He's now a terrorist expert with Kroll Associates. Jerry Hauer, thanks for being with us.
Sure, Dan.
A lot of talk about rage and revenge. It's being said in Washington, this quote bears the signature of Osama bin Laden. What is the workaday American to think about what has happened in our country today?
Well, I think the first focus right now has to be on the victims and the families of this horrific event, and on the work of the rescue workers that both here and in Washington. Certainly our prayers go out to them, and we've seen just a devastating event today. At the same time, we have to recognize that this was a cowardly act. This was an attack on the United States. I'm sure that the good work of the FBI in time, they will track down. Certainly this has the signature of bin Laden, but I think it's premature to point fingers. I think that we need to let the FBI do their work and try and point the finger as time goes on. Right now, the focus has to be on the response here in New York and in Washington.
Well, let's talk about that. What is happening at the city, state, and federal level as we speak?
Well, clearly, as we've heard from the mayor, there's an enormous response. The New York City Fire Department, Police Department have mobilized every bit of manpower. They've recalled all firefighters, police officers back to work. There are hundreds and hundreds of police officers, firefighters, ambulances coming from around the state, from New Jersey. The governor has mobilized the National Guard to assist New York City, and there will be federal assets coming in, both from a law enforcement perspective to assist the New York office of the FBI, but more importantly to assist the response. FEMA urban search and rescue teams. A collapse of this magnitude that is still burning, more than likely as a result of both the jet fuel and the gas that was in the building. I've been told that there's a gas leak in the building from the natural gas lines that feed the building. This could burn for quite some time, could burn for hours or even days. The recovery from this will take months and years.
A couple of questions. First of all, if we can get it up on videotape, I want to show you as well as viewers, because we're additional people are coming in front of their sets as the day goes along. If we can get the videotape up of three key events this morning, and the question is whether the collapse, this is not a graphic, this is an actual picture of the plane coming into one of the World Trade Center towers, and then those flames shooting out the other side.
Right.
And then we'll follow on the videotape. This happened around 9 a.m. this morning.
Right.
And then not too long after that, in the 9 to 10 period, one of the towers began collapsing. We had hoped against hope it was partial collapse. Some people leaped out of the building or were forced out by the flames and the explosion. They would gasp on the ground. My question is, we watch this first one tower collapse, that's what you're going to see on the videotape, right. Then another tower collapse. Is this massive destruction of the World Trade Center, based on what you know, and I recognize we're dealing with so few facts, is it possible that just a plane crash could have collapsed these buildings, or would it have required the sort of prior positioning of other explosives in the building? What do you think?
No, my sense is that just one, the velocity of the plane and the fact that you have a plane filled with fuel hitting that building that burned, the velocity of the plane certainly had an impact on the structure itself. And then the fact that it burned and you had that intense heat probably weakened the structure as well. And I think it was simply the planes hitting the buildings and causing the collapse. As you can see, the impact on the rescue workers. I mean, these people who are heroes in this building that have been impacted by this. The number of people that have been injured, the number of police and fire officers, firefighters that have been injured is just it's incalculable at this point.
And the mayor said within the last hour, I think, that there were indications that some people might still be alive in the debris of the building. That's reasonable to accept that.
Oh, it's this early into an incident, you have to assume that some people are alive. I know that after all the years I've worked with the New York City Fire Department and Police Department, they will make every effort to do everything humanly possible to get in there to find any potential victims that might still be alive, recognizing that additional collapses of these buildings and the buildings, I'm told, in the area, there's a potential for a collapse of another building next door. They are going to do everything humanly possible to search that rubble.
Well, I'm recalling the terrible events when the federal building in Oklahoma City was, in effect, destroyed. It took days, and there were days, in fact, when people sniffing dogs, it's not an elegant phrase, were brought into play. Is that scene, it seems to me, is very likely to be played on a greater scale in the days to come.
A much greater scale. When you've got, it took days and weeks to get through the Mura building. You've now got two buildings that have literally been destroyed. The biggest problem in going through and doing any kind of search and rescue at this point is the potential for additional collapse and the potential for putting additional people in jeopardy. And the New York City Fire Department, New York City Police Department will try and do rescues, but they will have to recognize, and it's a difficult call, that there could be additional collapses. This scene will play out, the search and rescue effort will play out over not days, but weeks, and body recovery could play out over a period of many, many weeks.
Let me pause and say the U.S. Federal Reserve says it is open and operating, the Federal Reserve, and its discount window will provide liquidity to financial markets as needed. That, of course, is to be reassuring to the financial markets in this country and around the world. Mika Brzezinski is on the telephone down in Lower Manhattan. I want to bring her in a moment, but just before I do so, we may want to come back to this a time or two. You know, you served as the commissioner for Mayor Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management. Were you privy to intelligence reports at any level at that time from federal intelligence agencies? And if so, what perspective can you give us? I mean, there have been these repeated reports that, well, yes, Osama bin Laden, but some think he's been overemphasized as responsible for these kinds of events. I know many intelligence people at very high levels who say, listen, you can't have these kinds of attacks without having some state, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, somebody involved. Put that into perspective for us.
Well, I'm not sure I agree that this is necessarily state-sponsored. It, as I mentioned earlier, certainly has the fingerprints of somebody like bin Laden, but I think we have to wait and see. I think it's, we saw during the during the Mura building bombing, everybody jumped to conclusions early on about who was responsible for that. I think it's very premature. I think that we certainly know that based on what's going on around the world, what's going on in the Mideast, that we have been on, that things have been very tense. I'm not aware at this point of any specific threats against New York City, but that's something that both the intelligence gathering organizations and the FBI will be looking at very closely in the days to come.
One of the most experienced intelligence people I know, a man who was responsible for tracking down terrorists, once said to me, revenge is best served cold. Mm-hmm. What he meant by that was that you can have your rage, but if it's a counterpunch you intend to take, better to have patience, wait, bide your time.